Konnichiwa, Edge Runners, and welcome to Night City for this week's look at another riveting source book from the Cyberpunk 2020 line, the Pacific Rim Sourcebook. As you can expect, this book covers Southeast and East Asia, as well as Australia and New Zealand. The book is known for its change in writing style and being presented as a travel guide instead of its normal style. Get ready for a whirlwind tour, because I'm Mr. Welch and we are headed east to Asia to look at the Pacific Rim Sourcebook. The Sourcebook was written in 1994 with 9 separate authors attributed, most of them being members of the Far East Amusement Research Company, better known as FEAR. The book is beefy at 160 pages, making it one of the largest books in the Cyberpunk line. There's enough content in the book that it required 2 editors. Asia has a special place in cyberpunk settings, and the book spared no effort in getting the Asian cultures right. The opening section is actually quite small, but full of needed information about the basics of the various countries. There's a section on exchange rates, so you know how much your bot will buy if you don't have any euro on you. The book covers the cultural familiarity chart that they lifted straight from the Wildside book, so you have an understanding of how similar the cultures are to each other. So Americans don't have a problem with dealing with Aussies, for example, but a tough time dealing with Filipinos and are completely out of their element in Japan. Japan is the first nation that is discussed, and rightfully so, as Japan occupies a special place in cyberpunk lore. Back in the 1980s, Japan was supposed to be the upcoming superpower, and the 2020 universe, that isn't far from the truth. Aside from the economic power, cyberpunk Japan isn't much different from real-world Japan. The nation is still very insular and quite fad-happy. Weapons are strictly controlled, so martial arts are the primary form of combat. Japanese corporations, called zaibatsu, are a major part of Japanese politics. These are megacorps, but ones utterly loyal to Japan and operated by family members rather than shareholders. The theme of Japan is everything is high-tech, and the more gauche the better. So, like real-life Japan. Moving on to Korea, the first thing you'll notice is Korea is reunited with the fall of North Korea during the food crash that crippled China and left North Korea almost defenseless. South Korea, after a military coup, decided it was the perfect time to strike, and after several years of brutal war, North Korea finally surrendered due to a lack of military aid and food. The Korean section is radically different compared to the Japan because it's written from a first-person point of view for most of it. The biggest change in Korea is the reestablishment of the caste system that has been destroyed by the Japanese occupation during World War II. This causes Korea to have serious problems between the haves and the have-nots, with the ruler spending more time consolidating power than helping the lower classes, especially the North Koreans. This is causing no small amounts of resentment, and Korea stands on the brink of tearing itself apart again. China is a shell of its real-world self because of a massive civil war and 2 devastating periods of mass migration, with Muslims fleeing the Mideast meltdown and the food blight that caused the northern provinces to evacuate to the cities of the south, which overwhelmed their abilities to sustain their new population. Because of this, the nation is heavily fragmented from region to region. Taiwan is completely broken away. Hong Kong was ravaged by fighting between Mao's loyalist cabal and the People's Liberation Army, with the MLA taking up arms in Kualan's walled city and other parts of Hong Kong. Tibet became a total wasteland when China finally grew tired of the minorities there, evacuated the Han Chinese, and let the radiation from the Middle East melt down, and it rendered the area uninhabitable. Shanghai embraced Hong Kong's free-form capitalism, while Hunan is still seeing the last of the Civil War, with the remnants of the PLC holding out in the countryside. The Chinese are still obsessed with their appearance to the outside world, but they lack the economic power they have in today's world. The rest of the book doesn't go into as much detail for the other Asian nations as it did for China, Japan, and Korea. One major part of this is that Southeast Asia doesn't have much of a cyberpunk culture. The nations tend to be poor, and the rest of the world is ahead of them technologically. It doesn't help that most of the nations are military dictatorships that don't have much of an interest bringing in outside technology. That doesn't help the juntas stay in power. One major part of the problem is the large number of Muslims that fled to Southeast Asia during the last Middle East war, which has become a major sticking point with the local populations there. In short, the nations of Myanmar, Cambodia, and Laos are known for their poor quality of life and constant feuding. Death squads are very much a thing, and the Khmer Rouge control all of Laos with their usual delicate touch. Vietnam, on the other hand, is communist in name only, as it took massive economic reforms and went full-on capitalist while the rest of the region imploded. With China and Korea divided, Vietnam began to pump out oil to the region with the help of Sov oil. Because of this, the nation is by far the wealthiest nation in all of Southeast Asia. Large numbers of American mercs find work here, using the nation as a staging point to the more volatile areas of Southeast Asia. The nation of Thailand stands out because it's an almost anarchy, with the only real laws being don't diss Buddha or the king. The country fully expects everybody to be on their best behavior towards each other because everybody else is going to be packing the same amount of firepower as the rest of the country. And surprisingly, it works. Now, there are laws against regular crimes, but the police expect the population to police itself. Because of this, the largest crime committed in Thailand is actually fraud because cheating tourists is bad for business. The island nations tend to be very wealthy, like Brunei, Singapore, and Indonesia, because of their isolation from the troubles of mainland Asia, and also the increased demand for their products, food in particular. The exception is the Philippines, which is a poor but proud nation. The Philippines are as a corporate puppet after 3 failed governments in a very short period of time, and they needed somebody to step in and maintain order. Outside the cities, there's almost no government, but inside the city, there's always somebody looking for work, which makes hiring edge runners a very lucrative business there. Australia is actually 2 nations now, with Western Australia seceding away because of the lack of support they received from Canberra and the rest of Eastern Australia. Australia is now facing serious issues because of an immigration policy that encouraged multiple migrants to come over and assimilate, but that fell apart badly when the immigrants split off from Australia along ethnic and racial lines and began demanding special treatment from the nation. West Australia has largely sold out to the corporations, but at the same time the people there benefit from higher wages and quality of life. As long as the corporations don't make a mess, the people in Western Australia don't really ask that many questions. Eastern Australia, on the other hand, is plagued by the large amounts of homeless, especially migrants, that have arrived without a method of sustaining the extra population. New Zealand is actually one of the more liberal nations in the world, having rejected corporations getting any special favors. The nation also bans nuclear-powered ships, still has welfare, and has even extracted corporate officials that have applied for sanctuary. New Zealand also doesn't have the racial strife Australia is plagued with, though their open borders policies have allowed the Chinese triads to gain a foothold in the nation. There is a greatly expanded section on martial arts and some optional rules in the back. If you want to expand on that part of your game, you will need this book. But that's it for the Pacific Rim Sourcebook. It's packed with information regarding the area. There is not a wasted page in this entire book. Each nation has its own life path to get you started on a character from that nation, with more complicated charts to deal with Japan's massive education system, to the less complicated charts for the war zones of Southeast Asia. If you want the book, it's $16 and it's still in print. If you're a Cyberpunk fan, there's no reason to get it for that price. Next week, check back as I'm jumping into the corporation guides with Corp Book 1, covering Arasaka and the International Electronic Corporations. Of course, we all know it's Arasaka is the only reason why people bought this book, though.